And we're continuing in the 16th book of Israel. We're getting close to the end. And we're on chapter 40. Take your vacation at the House of Yahweh, starting September 24th. The end is in this generation. And this can be found on page 449. If you recall, this was leading up to another watch, as we have learned. And we've had various watches since the establishment of the House of Yahweh. And there may be more. But we have to have it firmly set in our minds the prophecies that Yahweh declared by his prophets of old. And, be ironclad about it. Okay? And we're going to get into more of that as we move on here. So, let's start here at verse 2. It says, this is beautiful, and he's talking about the news. We're seeing it looks horrible, but it's got to be, and Yahweh prophesied it. They make out like he's causing it, but he's not. And that statement right there is, when you understand that statement right there, you understand the job that Yisrayl Hawkins have to do in glorifying Yahweh. Glorifying Yahweh is simply explaining Yahweh to the people who were given false information before. Okay? That he's a mean, jealous, revengeful God. Okay? And glorifying Yahweh, which is the thing that Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins have been made his job to do in these last days, is to simply let the world know that Yahweh is a kind. Look at the fact that he planned this all out, okay, for us to have eternal life. That right there should tell you something. In fact, continuing on, he says, he's trying to warn the people, everyone in the world. I've got proof of that here in just a minute. The warnings that he's sending out from his house are really great. Now he goes into one of the newsletters that he wrote and put out, and certain numbers that was associated with that. This particular news article, in the middle of verse 3, says, Hawkins writes, earliest biblical writings shed light on hereditary acquired diseases. I think most of you all know what I wrote about here. Let's jump over to verse 4. Now, Pastor says, when they first called me about, I think, 6:30 this morning, they told me that the number was 70,271 hits or impressions. Then, towards the end of that verse, that's while he was, talking, he got the information on what the impressions are currently. And it was 74,613. An interesting number. And he was beginning to say or to think that the people who supplied him with the number was, cooking it up. So if you turn your pages to page 452 on verse 21, we're just going to skip over here for a little second. He says, now this was just before I stepped up here on stage to speak what this was given me. And I said, you made that up, made that number up. They said, no, I did not. I didn't even know it. I just saw the time and pressed it to print, and I didn't notice it until it was printed out. I said, praise Yahweh. So that's how that worked, and as soon as they printed it out, that was the number. So praise Yahweh for that. Now, the number 74 means Father of Light. I'm going back to page 449 now. That was one of the numbers on my stone, which is one of Pastor's lot numbers. And Yahweh gave me and said, this is your lot, Father of Light. I looked it up, and it also says, my Father is a lamp. It kind of reminds me of what Yeshua came teaching, that Yahweh is salvation. And it all lines up. All of it, lines up, brethren. And we should begin to see this. It's a simple message. Really, it is a simple message. Okay, it's a message, you don't have to be sophisticated to receive this message. Verse 6, the seventh lamp, Scripture shows that we are the seventh of the seven lampstand, Revelation 11, and other places. But word 74 also means to shine. That's what we're doing. We're shining all over the world right now. And in verse 7, he mentioned about a nation in Africa that several people are wanting to come to the house of Yahweh. In verse 8, he says, I was telling the priest this morning that we really need to start searching more on these numbers. The prophecies. You can't beat the prophecies. The prophecies are absolutely reliable. And we should not doubt the prophecies. And people come here to the house of Yahweh, and because something doesn't go to their expectation, they leave. And they were at a place where they were hearing of these prophecies. Okay? And these are the words of Yahweh. They are going to come true. You can trust in them, brethren. Okay? The numbers that Yahweh gave us, and it says, I wanted to draw a reference to Habakkuk here. And I know the thing is, the issue is to wait. And that's something that you always hear me harping on. Okay? That's the test that we have to face, brethren, is to wait. Okay? In Habakkuk 2, verse 3, it says, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie, though it seems slow. You see that? And when you think about it, when you think about Yahweh's interaction with his people, this waiting is part of that. Look at Abraham. From the time he was told that he would father great nations, and yet he didn't have a son. And he had to wait. And how long oftentimes Yahweh allow his people to wait? How long? When it seems as if it's no longer going to take place. When it seems as if it's impossible now, as in the case of Abraham. You see? That's, keep these things in mind, brethren. It may seem slow. Wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not delay. Okay? It will surely come. And also, a similar scripture is in Hebrews 10. Hebrews 10, verse 37. It says, "For yet a little while, and he who is coming will come, and will not delay." Okay? This is for us. All right? Now, the just will live by the faith. Here, this is the test. Are you willing to wait? And are you willing to live righteously, justly, okay, while you wait? You know, what is it that you're waiting for? Aren't we waiting to live righteously for eternity? So why we can't wait? Why we can't just live out the rest of our days by the faith, living? And what is the faith? Is the sum total of the system of laws that we keep. Okay? We shouldn't be wanting to go anywhere if this is the faith that we want to live by. There is no reason to want to go anywhere. Okay? So, this is our test. Just keep that in mind, brethren. This is our test. But Yahweh is giving us, Yahweh is still feeding us through His servant on a daily basis the things that we need for our spiritual growth. Okay? We are not being left without. In verse 9, it says, "The world right now is getting ready for war." Now you could see that. You know it's coming. Okay? There can be no doubt, brethren. Nobody here is supposed to be doubting that this is going to take place. It's not going to be long off, a long time off. And by the way, with Yahweh, He lives forever. So, you know, a short time for Him might seem a little bit long for us, right? You know, but we have to remember we are going to be adopting His mindset here not too long, right? And it will be so for us too that we'll be able to look and see a few years as being short. And, you know, we could do that right now, actually. When you look back, how long, you know, if you look back and see when certain things occur in your life, you know, it's like, it was just like yesterday almost, right? So, it says here, there are two of them shown that will get to maybe this week or next, but two nuclear wars shown. The second one is the one that will darken the sun. The first one is already begun. It began with the date that we gave in the book. And so the first one is the one that will kill a third of mankind. Okay? And these things start with decisions, brethren. That's where they start. Okay? You know, by the time it transpires that the bombs go off, a lot of things would have taken place. Do you see the posturing that's going on in the world today? Do you see how they are sanctioning this nation and so forth and so on? That's all a part of this war. That's all a part of this war. Okay? And here Pastor mentioned Revelation 17 and Revelation 18, okay, as describing this. In verse 10, it says, Henry Kissinger, Donald Trump has absolutely no baggage. Now, Pastor had a lot of different articles that he was reading from in the sermon here. And this particular article was very interesting. The article was saying how Donald Trump had little baggage. He he won the presidency based on his ideals, on his plans. Okay? That's the basis of it. It wasn't like he is obligated to some various groups. So he becomes a more difficult person to handle, so to speak, is what Henry Kissinger is saying. Okay? It says here, I got it back. It says, following this meeting last week, President-elect Donald Trump, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, described the fellow Republican as one of the most unique incoming presidents due to his lack of obligation to any particular group. This president-elect is the most unique that I've experienced in one respect. Kissinger, 93, that's how old he is. He has absolutely no baggage. He said, he has no obligation to any particular group because he has become a president on the basis of his own strategy and a program he put before the American public that his competitors did not present. So that is a unique situation. Now, why Henry Kissinger wanted to have tea with Donald Trump? And Pastor went into that. And you will find the reason in Revelation 17. That's why he mentioned Revelation 17 there. It ties in. Because Revelation 17 is telling us who is orchestrating things. And Henry Kissinger, this pastor also mentioned another article here. Verse 15. It says, neoconservative at the Vatican, Henry Kissinger to become political advisor to the Pope. So you see who was really trying to get the attention of Trump. You see that? Okay? Through Henry Kissinger. You see? So, these things, you don't hear news commentators knowing about this kind of stuff, brethren. Only pastor, this information has been given to pastor. Okay? So, it's not secret to him. Let's jump back up to verse 14. It says, the name change, I don't have time to cover this right now, but the Pharisees changed the name of Yeshua and put two gods. That was done for deception. Keep that in mind. Keep that deception in mind. They had to be deceived to bring this about. What they're bringing about right now is carrying a great deal of deception, because none of it makes sense. You see, the moves they're making, they're moving towards war. They're not moving towards peace. Don't ever get that impression. Every move they have made is towards war. Okay? And they're wanting this one world government, and that's what's going to bring about the war. You see? Verse 16, Kissinger's 1974 plan for food control genocide. Kissinger, if you look up his history, there hasn't been too much great stuff that Kissinger has ever done. But he's had great plans to bring what they are doing to the Palestinians in Israel. Kissinger is behind that. He's the one that started this plan that is being carried out there now. I told you years ago that they're going to beat these people down to where they won't object. I'm running out of time. Okay. So, verse 17. Now, in this article, it says, what if nuclear weapons are used? That's the name of the article. On page 3, I believe it says, Henry Kissinger wrote, what if nuclear weapons are used? Well, Henry Kissinger is the Pope's advisor. He's the Vatican's advisor. And he wrote, with proper tactics, nuclear war need not be destructive as it appears. So they're rationalizing their strategy. They're putting it out there. So, to see what kind of reaction that they get. You see, they are the ones who set up things like, the World Tribune that judge people for war crimes and stuff, and they don't want to be charged for that kind of a stuff. But nobody was going to be left the type of war that they're planning to bring. Okay, in verse 18 it says, Trump to meet with Kissinger. This is the next article. He's meeting with Trump, Kissinger, and Wolfowitz to advise the Pope. And these things never escape pastor. Whenever it comes up and it's in line with prophecy, he picks it up. Let's turn to the next page on verse 22. It says, Pope Francis urges UN conference to act without delay on climate change. Let's hurry and get this done. Well, what are they wanting to get done? They're wanting to be able to control the food supply, which Henry Kissinger says, you control the food supply, you can control the people. So don't hurt the oil or the wine. But get to where you can control both of them. And always keep that in the back of your mind when you hear things going on on the world stage. In verse 25 it says, Russia reveals Satan 2, nuclear missile capable of destroying Texas in one blow. Think about that. Think about that. Texas is huge. This is like they know it's coming from Satan. You see that? It's the word Vatican. You wouldn't hear a House of Yahweh member using something like that. Especially if they know it means divining serpent. And they know this, and that's what they use. So they're telling you, they're telling you who they are, really. Putin knows this too. Russia does, or their Russian Federation, the army, the navy, the Marines of Russia, because they named this thing Satan 2. And this thing is a 40 megaton bomb. That's huge. 2,000 times more powerful than what they used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When this thing comes, brethren, and when the prophecies, you see the prophecies fulfilled, the wait that we wait is going to seem like it was nothing. You ever had suffered some type of pain? Excruciating pain? Pain to where you think you are going to die. And then it passed. It passed. And you could actually forget it. So, whatever it is that we're going to be going through, brethren, let's do it and do it with nobility. Do it without murmuring and complaining. Because when these prophecies are fulfilled, brethren, it is going to be so incredible. I mean, it is going to be so incredible. It is worth the wait. Okay? It is well worth the wait. I need to get to a few scriptures before I conclude. So I'm going to go ahead and read those scriptures. In verse 39, it says, scientists finds new culprit to climate change. This man says methane producing and consuming organisms played an important role in greenhouse gas emissions and consumption, contributing to climate change. These are the microbes that Yahweh put in the heavens when he made the heavens, formed the heavens. I've brought all that out, this prophetic word called real cause of global warming. Verse 40, now something else is been taking place for years. Yahweh shows in Leviticus 18 the confusion that comes from a certain way of life that's causing this confusion. Scientists know after we put it out and have been putting it out for about 40 years now, the scientists discovered this uncover how microbes invade the brain. The microbes are in the brains of children now born. Verse 48. The only solution that is available, the only one that will work, is the one that Yahweh has planned. That's it. It's the only solution for mankind in these last days. The only solution. Okay? That is to let mankind do his thing and not interfere except to guide his plan. Okay? And that's being done for mankind who has been ignoring Yahweh. Okay? And been rebellious. Okay? They put in the King James Version that Yahweh is doing this and he's very angry. That was Satan's doing. She's the one that authorized this. Her and her gods are the ones that authorized this for it to be done. And let me read the last verse. Verse 59. We are blessed now with the knowledge increase because we can see the news taking place. And, you know, we can see it, the knowledge increase, the television, the communication, the internet and all that. We're also blessed with the increase in knowledge about health. Okay? And things that we can do to help us maintain proper health. Don't forget that, brethren. That's really all I have for you today. If you all please stand as I welcome to the stage the great Kahan Matithia Arsaman.
Praise God, great Khan. You may be seated, men. Shalom, great men of Yahweh. We're going to be continuing on here where the great Khan left off in chapter 40 of the 16th book of Yisrayl. The 16th book of Yisrayl, which is the Sea of Glass book, chapter 40. And just to rehearse, we're going over the 11/26/2016 sermon. And the title of the sermon Pastor gave at this time just a little bit over a year ago said, "Take your vacation at the house of Yahweh, starting December 24th. The end is in this generation." And I don't know if y'all remember years ago what Pastor said, you know, vacations are vacant times. You know, if we have vacant times, we should be spending those times here at the house of Yahweh, not looking for some kind of pleasures of Egypt for a moment there, or pleasures of sin for a moment. We're going to pick up here on page 456 of the 16th book of Yisrayl, 456, and we're going to be picking up here in verse 66. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. It's truly an honor to come before you, great men of Yahweh. Here in verse 66, Pastor says, these things are all shown in the Scripture. And he was talking here about the destruction of the temple, how it was prophesied to be destroyed, how Yeshua prophesied this before he died, how Daniel himself, when he saw these, the history that was shown in prophecy, when he read the books, how he was terribly distressed. And Pastor showed here, these things are all shown in Scripture. In fact, Scripture is the best history, and everyone admits that it is. The only right history that we've got, but most of it is contaminated. But the Bible, even the King James Version, gives you the history of the 12 tribes and the miserable state that all of them were in. They were fighting each other and being taken and told, you can't use the name. Okay, so we can see here through the history of the Scriptures, and these things were shown. Remember, the Scriptures is a book that was compiled over, almost 4,000 years of work by our great forefathers. Okay, all the way from Abel down to Yochanan the Revelator, who was given the last book of Revelation, and he wrote this in about 96 AY. So you almost have about 4,100 years of writings and of testimony by our great forefathers showing what would take place, what would befall in these last days, and also showing what takes place when mankind goes their own way. And if you think of the youth of society, the world today is actually fairly young. Besides this Roman Empire, which still rules the earth, and only, like the great Khan said before me, only being taught by pastor would you understand those things. You're not going to turn on, the news or open up a newspaper and it's going to say, the Roman Catholic Church, is the leader of the kings of the earth. You're not going to see those things in the news. Now, a lot of people are catching on to the things that pastors have been putting out now for almost 30, 40 years here from Abilene, and they're starting to catch on and to actually see certain things. And so you have these different groups popping up and putting material out and things on the internet, showing some of the control that the Roman Catholic Church has over some of the leaders of the earth, or how they're actually inspiring certain things to take place, but they still never have the complete picture. You can see little bits in here, little bits here and there. People will have different groups or individuals or authors and such, but they never have the complete picture because they lack the knowledge that comes from the Scriptures. And most of the Scriptures they can't understand because it hasn't been opened to them. Remember, Yeshua, it was sealed up, and Yeshua said he would open these seals in these last days to the seventh messenger. So unless you have the seventh messenger, unless you have, the one who's authorized to actually be able to have this inspiration, then there's no understanding coming from these things. But you can see here in the Scriptures, it shows here, even in the King James Bible, that they were fighting each other and being taken and told you can't use the name. After Moshe had given the name and the laws of life, they were saying you can't use the name anymore, and you can't be following these laws. It's impossible to keep the Sabbath. They made the Sabbath a great burden to the people. Okay, we know the Scripture is the best source of history. Okay, it's the only right history source there is, because most history books have been swayed to different people's biases. But we know that Yahweh protected the Scriptures. He protected the Scriptures, and he allowed these writings, many of them which weren't even seen until the King James Bible came out in the 1600s. Many of these things were locked in vaults and in caves and basements, and they were put away, and they weren't even seen until, under inspiration of Yahweh, men put these things together. There was a demand for them, and these writings came out where we have this complete book, the great book of Yahweh now, which is 66 books of perfect history that shows what Yahweh instructed and how he commanded mankind not to turn from that instruction. And it's so important to remember these things, because you go reading, like in the book of Yirmiyah, you'll see how they were coming against Yahweh's name. They were coming against worshiping Yahweh, and they were trying to make it look like Yirmiyah chapter 44. Remember, the people would say, well, when we worship Mother Mary, then we had plenty of this and that, and we had riches, and our wives were joyful, and all these different things. But now we started worshiping Yahweh. We've been in this wilderness, roughing it, toughing it, and this is undoable. We're going back to worshiping Mother Mary, because mankind, we have a short attention span, right? Okay, we have a short attention span. We can easily be swayed, and a lot of times, if it's not instant, if it's not something that's able to be seen right away, it's very easy to get deceived, as we see in Genesis chapter 3, where Eve allowed herself to become deceived. How so? Because Satan started, through her messengers, started preaching about, how they've been sinning, and, nothing occurred to them, and, they're not dead. Look at them, they're having a great time, and they miss that surely you will die, dying you will die, that it's a pattern that's going to be handed down to their children, and to their children, and to their children, and it's going to come down to a point where mankind's going to, their days upon the earth are going to be, less than any time in history, in the entire history of mankind, in the 6,000 years of mankind. We see where mankind now is only allotted a very few number of years. They can't even get a century barely, they can't get a century out of life anymore. But continuing on here, Pastor shows, if we're going to have to jump over here to verse 78, we have a whole lot of verses here. Reminds me of when Pastor says about, you have, in some scriptures, you may have 1,000 sermons. Maybe in one verse, you may have 100 sermons. Well, in these books of Yisrayl, you have tons of sermons in just each little verse. But we're trying to just get through some specific points here for this evening's class. And of course, in your own time, I do encourage you, as always, to study these chapters and keep up with the, we're only doing one chapter in law class and one chapter in workshops. Try to study those chapters throughout the week, or study the chapter that's coming up next week, so you kind of have the whole sermon in your mind. And if you have the ability to go to Yahweh.com, you can actually pull up these sermons. You can actually watch these sermons and listen to them and rehearse them. Read along while you're watching them. There's something that comes from both hearing something and seeing it, which is the importance of the message being preached and published, as Yahweh did say would take place in these last days. And this is the only time period now where we have this technology where it can be both preached and published for all the world to see. Before this last days generation, no other house of Yahweh in history had the opportunity, to reach out into the entire earth. They were able to send out letters, and send out teachers and messengers, but it only could reach so far as the people could travel. It couldn't go out like it does today, where it's, given here and it reaches out to the other side of the earth, almost instantaneously. But in verse 78 on page 457, it talks here, and he's speaking a little bit about Satan and the combat, the showdown against Yahweh's way, and how this court case came up before the judges in heaven, and how Satan asked Yahweh had asked Satan, well, have you considered my servant Job? In verse 78 it says, they came before Yahweh in the courts for that purpose. They wanted to run down and try to destroy in the minds of the heavenly beings the creation of Yahweh, who Yahweh said, I'm going to make man in my image. Man or mankind includes men, women, and children. He is making us into his likeness. His likeness. The laws of Yahweh are perfect. They're his likeness, and they make man perfect. So you can see here how Satan and the gods and her sons, they tried criticizing Yahweh and his work and his plan, and who knows, what they were using as an excuse, but they're obviously, taking a set group of men. Maybe it was the men who lived before Job. Maybe they used Moshe as an example where he, fell short, or maybe they used King David as an example where he fell short. And they're bringing these things before the courts of heaven to try to make Yahweh and his creation, to try to make them, look as if it's some kind of a failed plan or something that can't work out. And Yahweh, of course, always being positive. He has the positivity. They're running them down. And, well, have you considered my servant Job? And you can just imagine old Satan probably got a little ticked off there, Man, Yahweh's always got the positive, got all this negative, and Yahweh always sees the positive in the negative. How's that so? I just can't believe Yahweh's always seeing the positive. And it's very easy, men, to be critical and to become critics of anything. I mean, you could criticize, the fact that, you didn't wake up feeling as great as you wanted to feel, or when you got out of bed, your leg hurt or something. You can always find, the Piece of Solution tells us to accentuate the positive and negate the negative, because the negative, it's always going to be, outnumbering the positive. But we got to focus on those things which are positive, and we have to continue to allow our minds, to grasp onto those things which are positive. And even in the worst of situations, you always can find positive, and you got to really try to focus on those positive things. It is possible to do. It's difficult at times, but it is possible to do. And Yahweh's laws, as we read here in verse 78, Yahweh's laws are perfect. and practicing them will make us perfect as well. So when you keep Yahweh's laws, and you put the peaceful solution into your life, and you start looking for the positive and trying to build that up, you actually start experiencing more joy, and you have an easier time dealing with tough situations. Even dealing with, if you have to deal with society today, there's a whole lot of negative in dealing with society today, but you gotta look for the little points of positivity and kind of build upon those things, so that you're able to more easily practice Yahweh's laws. You don't have to get angry or hateful or turn to rage or any of those things. You're able to actually focus on the positive, build those things up, and you can start becoming perfect, like Father Yahweh is perfect, and like our great high priest is perfect. Now, continuing on here on page 458 and verse 86, and Pastor's reading here the corrected translation of Daniel chapter 12 and verse 3, where it says, "And they who are wise, they will be the teachers of the wisdom of Yahweh. It will shine. Shine as the brightness of heaven." And then in verse 86 he says, "And those who turn many to righteousness, the teachers, these great teachers, you." It's speaking of you, brethren, in the house of Yahweh. And that's the reason I tell you, when you come here, the main thing is to become a teacher. Yes, you can help in the chores. We need your help in the chores. But get signed up and don't let anyone stop you from those classes. If you have to get the class on tape, we'll get it to you on tape. If you still get the class on tape, you're like really old school, because tape is almost a thing of the past. But, there's modern day tapes, there's discs, and there's flash drives and such. But if you don't finish your job on time and get to the class late, we can repeat it for you, but we'll get it. It's important that you get it. Okay, so you can see here the emphasis that Pastor's putting on here, and what is he talking about here? He's talking about not letting anyone or anything stop us from becoming a teacher of righteousness. And if you read that verse again right there in verse 86, you look at what he says here. He says, "Those who turn many to righteousness," the teachers, these great teachers, you. He's speaking to us. We are supposed to be training to be these great teachers. Yahweh didn't bring us here to chill out in Texas and sit on a lawn chair and, sip a margarita or, Okie or whatever it is you like to sip on. And, if you notice, Texas, this is kind of like a God-forsaken land, kind of like Oklahoma was when Pastor grew up. There ain't too much great scenery. There ain't too much great weather. It's always one extreme or the next. The locals, they about drive you batty if you have to deal with the locals too much. But Yahweh's brought us here to train to become these teachers, these great teachers. That's why we were brought here, man. Yahweh didn't just bring us here, because we smelled so pretty and he wants us to be in his kingdom. No, he brought us here to become these teachers. And we have to make sure we're not letting anyone or anything stop us from becoming a teacher of righteousness. So we have to put forth the effort. I know we're all busy. We all have busy schedules, but schedules are kind of like DVDs. You can kind of take your schedule remote and you kind of just pause something at one point, and you take a bathroom break if you're watching a DVD and you didn't want to miss nothing. You press the pause button, or on the computer or the phone. You press the pause button, you go to the bathroom, you come back and you press play. It's kind of the same thing with our chores and our work, man. I've never met, and you can come and tell me if you have all this spare time, we'll find you something to do. But I've never met anyone in the house of Yahweh today who's not always having things that have to be gotten done, but we have to prioritize things. Why has Yahweh brought us to his house? He's brought us here to become teachers, so you be busy, you be getting things done, you got all this work to do and all these chores, but, and Pastor, he'll always say, the work, don't let the work go undone, but also make the classes, and people say, well, how are you supposed to do both? I can't be in two places at once, and sometimes maybe there are some things. There's some schedules that can't be broken. You tried telling the cows to wait a little while to be milked, the goats to be milked, you're going to have a lot of problems. You're going to have a lot of problems, and then all the people are going to be mad, there's not cheese, and there's not ice cream, and there's not, milk. So there's certain things where we do have to get maybe the discs or such. But, man, if at all possible, if we can kind of pause our schedule and cut off, get to these classes, there's only 2 nights besides the Sabbath night, besides tonight, where there's classes. So there's only about, 2-3 hours a week, within that 100 and something hours that take place throughout the week. And we're actually able to break off and get in these classes. We really need to be striving to do this and not allow things to be Pastor said right here, don't let anyone or anything stop you from becoming a teacher of righteousness. And if you're thinking, whoa, I go to the class, and they just read the book. They just read the book. I can stay in my bed and read the book. Well, you're missing the point of the classes, man. I guarantee you, if you take the classes, and I'll tell you this from my own experience, if you go through the classes and you continue to go through these classes, you'll start seeing the benefits in your life. And you'll start learning something in each class that you never heard before. And it might just be, out of an hour of class, you might just hear 2 or 3 minutes of something you never heard before. But it's going to be something that helps build upon, as the great prophet Isaiah said, it's going to be line upon line and precept upon precept, and here a little and there a little. You're not going to be able to just sit home. We do need to study at home, but you can't just sit home and read the books and think, well, I read the book, so Yahweh just going to open my subconscious mind and bam, I'm going to be a great teacher of righteousness. I'm going to go forth throughout the universe. I'm going to be the greatest thing that's ever been seen. It's not that easy, man. It's not that easy. If it was that easy, then salvation would only cost you, $49 for a book of Yahweh and $12 for each peaceful solution for about $350. Bam, teacher of righteousness. I got the book of Yahweh. I got the peaceful solution. I got the subconscious mind, so I just got to be like flipping it like this every day. And if I just keep flipping it like that, and I'm going to be able to be a teacher of righteousness. We have to be trained, man. We have to be trained. And Pastor, he's been training men and young men for many, many years before we ever came here, before we were probably even ever born. And those men now are being sent to teach and to train us, and I guarantee you, okay, I'm not going to guarantee you, but most likely, a pastor said, man, I'm having a special class tonight from 7 to 8 or whatever it was. You Johnny on the spot, you'll be there, right? Or, man, we're having free steaks this first day evening at 5:30. The line would be to the south office, and there wouldn't be no room to get in the sanctuary. If we really want to do it, we're going to put forth that energy and that effort in getting there, and we have to realize that just because we don't see Pastor at the class and he's not up in front of the podium, every time there's a message that's coming forth from Yahweh's house and we're invited to be here, there's something that's vital to our salvation. He used to put it in all the tops of the newsletters and the prophetic words about, read this and compare it with your holy scriptures. These things are vital to your salvation. Every class, every presentation that comes forth from the house of Yahweh, these things are vital to our salvation. And don't be sitting there and be like, oh, dang it, Pastor's not speaking again. The women are speaking, and I got to listen to the women? Well, you don't have to. We have a choice. We have free moral agency here, but I guarantee you that if Pastor allows, this to go out to the entire universe, and he's allowing their presentation, which they're teaching the women, and he's allowing everyone to view these things, there's something vital to our salvation there, man. And we have to be diligent to give them the same respect that we would give Pastor, that we would give Yeshua, that we would give Yahweh, that there's something coming that we have to learn here, and we have to make sure we're not letting anyone or anything stop us from becoming a teacher of righteousness, because that's what we're called here for. If you got a book right there in verse 86, you can highlight it, you can circle it, you can go home and take a picture of it and blow it up, big enough to cover half of your mirror. And the teachers, these great teachers, it's speaking of you, brethren, in the house of Yahweh. We need to be these teachers. And if we allow things to distract us, then Satan will deceive us. That she will deceive us. It doesn't mean you're going to start eating pork tomorrow or you're going to start going to church, but you're going to throw away a position, and one day you're going to say, dang it, son of a gun, can you believe what I just did? And you're going to be so miserable. You're going to be so miserable. You ever had like one of those really great deals where, somebody offered you something, it was like a super great deal, and you're like, I better think about it, and the next day it was already gone, and a couple weeks later you really needed that thing, and you just didn't have it, and you're like, man, I should have got that, I can't believe I didn't get that. You get a little frustrated with yourself, It's going to be the same way if we watch those who are putting forth the effort and qualifying for what Yahweh brought them here to his house to qualify for. We're going to watch them go on and achieve great things. And I don't know about you, but I do not want to be in Texas forever, okay? If you want to be in Texas forever, you're a really fine fella, okay? All right, man, you're really something great. Texas is a beautiful place. It's a beautiful temporary dwelling place. But when you read the scriptures and the promises that Yahweh offers about this great city, Yahweh Shema, and the great job that's going to be had to go and teach throughout the entire universe, if you want to stay in Texas, I mean, I'm not going to criticize you because it's easy to criticize things, but I'm just going to say you're really not looking at the whole picture. We're not looking at the whole picture. We're allowing someone or something to stop us from becoming a teacher of righteousness, so we can't be doing that in these last days, man. We need to put forth the effort. You know, Yahweh worked so hard to get us here. You know, you can think back about your own life and the enormous amount of garbage you went through and maybe your parents went through. And Yahweh still got us here. You know, we can't get lackadaisical and think, well, we just put it on cruise control now and somewhere here is going to be an exit. Yahweh Shema right there. Subconscious mind open, take the books and go forth and teach. We have to be taught how to teach, man. And that's what we're learning here at the Great House of Yahweh. We're learning what to teach so we can go out and be sent to teach what we've learned. Okay, and if you go over here to page 459, in verse 92, Pastor says, he's talking here about the mountain, okay? The word tree and the word mountain. Mountain should make you think of Micaiah chapter 4, verse 1. And if you've noticed the great new scenery outside in the parking lot, if you haven't, you may take some time to go read it. But Micaiah chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 is there for all to read. And in the last days, no, there are no more days. These are the last days when this takes place. You know, if we have like some kind of an ultimatum, like, you know, well, after I do this, and after I do that, and after I get that handled, you know, we probably got, right, hey, Pastor, we probably got a couple of months, right, so I can handle all this stuff, and then I'm going to start going to class. No, these are the last days, man. There are no more days after these days. And how many days are left? Yahweh knows these things. But I guarantee you, if you put forth the energy and effort and every day Yahweh gives you to strive for that great position, you're never going to be dissatisfied. You're never going to be regretful. You know, you're going to be so joyful for taking the time to actually build upon what Yahweh called you here for, what He's called us here for, man. You know, I'm not like talking down to y'all. I'm speaking for myself too, you know. I know everyone thinks Ocam and Tether, he's just like one of those rare breeds, you know. They molded them, popped them together, and bam, he's just got it. You know, every day I got to struggle just like you, man. I got to be tested. I got to be tried. I got to be more patient, have more self-control, you know, because if you don't practice what we're being taught, if we don't practice what's being taught, it doesn't work for us. You know, there ain't no individuals that it just is so easy for them to do because of genetics or their lifestyle or the way they grew up. Now, sadly, man, you need to go back and read, I think it's in the book of Yeketskia, like chapter 34 or 36, it says, Son of man, when you see sins have reached their peak. You know, sins have reached their peak, so there isn't nothing that's come forth in this last generation except Pastor, which he was born in 1934. You know, none of us were even thought of back then. Maybe a few, man. I'm not going to criticize you if you're up in that beautiful age, but very few. But after that, it just, you can see, go back and read the history of mankind, what took place. You know, a couple years later, television was invented. You know, by the time Pastor was a teenager, remember he talked in some of his sermons how people were doing things that were improper. You know, things were coming into their town that were improper, and they were still running it out of that town, but, you know, Oklahoma was a God-forsaken land. You know, Yahweh allowed Pastor to grow up there because there was a specific set of morality that people still clung to, which was the Scriptures. They clung to the Scriptures, and they clung to the Ten Commandments. But the rest of the country and the rest of the world, man, they were enjoying, you know, this freedom to make their own choices and do what they want to do. But here in verse 92, Pastor says, these are the last days when this takes place. This is the final generation given to the Roman Catholic Church, the roving Catholic Church, when the roving army who took Daniel prisoner. Okay, so this is the last generation of the world given to the Catholic Church. You know, remember this fourth beast? Daniel prophesied 4 beasts. 4 beasts, and there's only been 4 world-ruling empires, and this fourth beast is the last generation of the world giving over to of the people and by the people and against Yahweh. Because after this generation, man, Yahweh is going to turn these things around. He's going to set forth you who are going to qualify to be these great teachers of righteousness, and you're going to go out and teach Yahweh's laws. And as Zechariah chapter 14 and Isaiah chapter 66 says, everyone is going to come and keep the feast. You know, if they don't, they'll bring their own curses upon themselves. Right now, you know, rain comes upon the just and the unjust, but ain't no rain coming upon the unjust at that time period. Yahweh prophesies that everyone will come up to keep the feast 3 times a year. And in verse 104 on page 460, here at the about the end half here, Pastor says, "That's what I'm making of you, a Yahweh family to be a blessing. And you will shine if you become the teachers that Yahweh wants. You will shine forth the righteousness. You will shine as the stars. You're going to hold the highest positions in the universe, brethren." And it's not like you're going to be like a super lumen flashlight. Your righteousness is going to be seen by others. You're going to be able to actually lead and guide others into righteousness, just as, we use the sun to set the days, and they use the different stars and constellations for different positioning systems and such. You are going to be what leads and guides people. This is the way, walk you in it. Do not turn from this way. And what are you going to be using? Look here to verse 107. Pastor says, "Search out the book of Yahweh and read. Not one of these will fail. I am shepherding these, and I'm going to make sure they will take place." That's what this word means here. Search out the book of Yahweh and read. Search it out and read. And then in closing here on verse 114, which is page 462, Pastor says, start searching those numbers. And in this sermon, he was talking about the numbers and the importance of the numbers. And there is an importance, and we need to be putting forth the effort and keeping up with these things. That's the reason we have the discs and the tapes and the internet, to go back and rehearse these things, to study, rehearse, continue to learn and to understand what's the meaning of these things. But start searching those numbers. Do all the studying you can if you've got time. If you don't have work to do, the work comes first. That's the work of getting the message out and taking care of your brothers and sisters. That's the love you show forth to Yahweh. Do your chores, but study. Study and learn to teach. Okay, so we have to be able to make sure we're doing our studies, but we also have to make sure we're putting the work of Yahweh first, doing the work, then studying and learning to teach. And I know the busiest man on the face of the earth, and he does these things. He studies, yes, but he also does the chores that have to be done so that all the brothers and sisters can be served. And just in closing, if you write down for your notes, Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 3, it says, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, it will not lie. Though it seems slow, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not delay." Amen. I pray that you all stand firm to the great house of Yahweh. Continue tethering yourself to this choicest branch. And